What would you do if your 80,000-pound heavy-duty truck suddenly decided it no longer needed you to drive? Inside the cab, it is peaceful. The steady, deep rumble of the diesel engine acts as a comforting soundtrack, lulling you into a false sense of security as the miles roll by. The air pressure is nominal, and every system is functioning in absolute harmony. But beneath that heavy steel hood, deep within a labyrinth of high-pressure lines and spinning turbines, a silent mechanical countdown has already begun, and it is completely invisible from the driver's seat. You rely on this machine for your livelihood, and that rhythmic, healthy hum is exactly what makes you blind to a developing catastrophe. Most drivers simply wouldn't notice the slightest change in the engine's breathing until it is far too late. The failure begins with a sound so subtle it is almost imperceptible, a faint, high-pitched whistle. You might think it is just the wind catching the edge of a mirror, but it is actually your turbocharger crying out for help. In this turbocharger cross-section, a tiny metal seal keeps high-pressure oil separated from the air intake. Over thousands of miles, heat and debris wear this barrier down to a fraction of a millimeter, allowing pressurized oil to seep past and pool inside the air pipes. Most drivers checking their dipstick during a morning routine write off a tiny drop in engine oil levels as normal consumption. It is only a few drops of oil after all. But those drops aren't dripping onto the ground. They are methodically accumulating inside the engine's breathing system. By dismissing that slight loss of fluid, a mechanical trap is set, triggering the start of an unstoppable kinetic event. To understand why a tiny oil leak destroys a heavy-duty truck, we have to look at how a diesel engine breathes. Unlike a standard passenger car, a diesel engine has no spark plugs to ignite its fuel. This cylinder diagram shows how it actually works, relying on a principle called compression ignition. The heavy piston draws in pure air and compresses it so intensely that it becomes superheated to over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. When a fine mist of diesel fuel is injected, the heat of that compressed air instantly ignites it, forcing the piston down. To multiply that massive torque, manufacturers add a turbocharger. It takes the hot exhaust gases leaving the engine and uses them to spin a turbine wheel, which forces highly pressurized fresh air right back into the combustion cylinder. Because that turboshaft spins at mind-boggling speeds, sometimes exceeding 100,000 revolutions per minute, it requires a constant, pressurized bath of engine oil just to survive the intense friction. This creates a fatal design irony. The engine requires high-pressure oil to keep the turbo spinning, but that same oil is highly combustible. If it breaches the intake system and enters the cylinder, the engine will burn it as fuel. The worn turbo seal finally gives way entirely, blasting a steady spray of high-pressure engine oil directly into the intake manifold to mix with the incoming air. In the driver's seat, you feel an unprompted surge. The engine is now consuming its own lubricating oil, and the 80,000-pound rig lunges forward. You take your foot completely off the accelerator, but the RPMs continue to climb. You instinctively slam on the air brakes to scrub off speed, but the engine pulls harder and harder, actively fighting against the massive brake shoes. Panic sets in. You reach forward, turn the ignition key to the off position, and pull it completely out of the dashboard, but the engine does not stop. This feedback loop explains why. Because a diesel doesn't use an electrical spark to run, turning the key does nothing. The internal seal failure has created an endless supply of free fuel, flowing directly from the oil pan into the cylinders. As long as there is heat, pressure, and oil, it will continue to accelerate. The machine has severed all connection to your commands. It is now running entirely rogue, literally burning its own blood to stay alive. This is a diesel runaway. The engine feeds on itself in an unbreakable loop, screaming past the red line to 3,000, then 4,000 RPMs. Outside, an impenetrable cloud of thick, toxic smoke erupts from the exhaust stacks, completely blinding the highway. The centrifugal forces inside the block are now astronomical. The engine is spinning so fast that the internal springs can no longer pull the heavy steel valves shut in time, a catastrophic mechanical timing failure known as valve float. With the valves stuck open, the massive aluminum pistons, flying upward at thousands of feet per minute, violently slam into them, instantly shattering the heavy metal components into jagged pieces of shrapnel inside the cylinder. But the final death blow usually comes from the bottom end of the block. The internal connecting rods, thick, forged steel arms designed to withstand thousands of pounds of pressure, are stretched and twisted beyond their ultimate tensile strength. With an ear-shattering bang, a connecting rod snaps. Still attached to the wildly spinning crankshaft, the broken steel acts like a medieval mace, violently punching a massive hole straight through the solid cast-iron side of the engine block. Instantly, gallons of boiling oil erupt onto the highway. The sudden halt of internal kinetic energy violently seizes the drivetrain, locking the rear axles and forcing the smoking rig to a grinding halt on the shoulder. Silence finally falls, broken only by the hiss of boiling fluids and the metallic ticking of cooling steel, as the thick smoke begins to clear. The true weight of the disaster sinks in. This single seal failure created a life-or-death situation on a public highway, thousands of dollars in lost revenue, and an entirely destroyed $30,000 engine block. When mechanics tear down the ruined block, they don't find a massive flaw in the heavy-duty engine components. They find a tiny, heat-warped $10 seal resting on the workbench. A piece of metal no larger than a wedding ring brought this 80,000-pound heavy-duty truck to a complete, permanent halt. In the world of heavy machinery, ignoring a faint whistle or a drop of oil is a deadly mistake. The survival of the engine does not depend on the strength of the steel block, but on the integrity of its smallest internal components.